I wanted to fly out here and meet with you. Basically, I just wanted to come and say that I apologize. But I just feel like if I apologize...
Before we even begin to discuss apologies, before we even begin to discuss healing, closure, or working things out, this family needs to deal with how this episode opens. Because it tells you everything about where the power still rests in this family, and where this story truly resides. The episode is called What If We Work This Out? But it already seems kind of like a joke to consider the question, because what we're seeing here, it isn't a family working things out together. We're seeing a man figure out when and how he might want to reconcile. The first sound you hear isn't reflection, it isn't remorse, it's Kody Brown, breathing heavy, struggling his way up a hill like he's in some sort of self-imposed boot camp. The visor leading the way, looking less like a husband searching for peace and more like a person training for battle. That isn't an accident. All of this opening segment is theatrical. Kody is working out, carrying a backpack weighted down. That kind of equipment you're supposed to work out with when you're training for a serious reality competition series. And if you pay attention, you realize that it is obviously emulating what you've also observed of others preparing to enter a special forces type competition series. However, of course, he doesn't actually make that declaration. My wife is -1 years younger than me, he reports, and I do not wish to be the old man in the family. These are very personal issues that he needs to address and work out for himself, and just that one statement is causing a lot of harm because which family is he talking about now? Which wife? Which children? Because the implication here is clear. The family he is talking about now is no longer plural. It's singular, it's Robyn, it's Robyn's family, and all the rest of us are somewhere else in the picture. Robyn is present in the room with him, observing. She cannot lift the heavily weighted backpack, not even remotely, but instead of the occurrence inculcating a sense of humility in her or even comedy, it is flirting. Embarrassing, awkward flirting, she is present in front of him, staring at him as he does pull-ups, and it is a weird, perversely awkward scene to be witnessing. You can't change yesterday's weather in the same way you can in fact, according to Mary, it's when Kody is a good dad that she feels raw, which she obviously means when she's turned on. And then that line just hangs there, because a good dad, to whom, if she's referring to a good father to all his children, then well, that's an open door that this show has been working its tail off to keep shut, because if that's the level that has to be achieved, then we are left to wonder when Robyn has been able to lay eyes on that father. And if it's a good father to Robyn's children, then that's all we need to know. This is not flirting, it is signaling, it is reinforcement. It is validation of behavior that has left so many children emotionally stranded afterward. As if they are talking about their grocery lists, they sit down in the gauge and Kody begins to speak of his apology to Janelle. North Carolina. He speaks about how easy it was, how calm he felt, how good it made him feel afterwards. Just notice that phrase. Not how it benefited Janelle, not how it fixed whatever was broken, but how it made him feel. It is immediate and interesting. She doesn't talk much, she doesn't have to. Her face tells the whole story. The pauses, the muscles tightening around the mouth, the raised eyebrows. The flashes of micro-expressions that momentarily slip through before the words can keep up with them. There's discomfort there, maybe shock, maybe annoyance, maybe something a little bit closer to loss of control. It all adds up now. Because we will see that Janelle asked Kody not to bring Robyn to North Carolina, so think about being a Robyn in this moment to understand that an apology occurred without you in the room, without you as the mediator, without you as the emotional translator. This is important. Kody nonchalantly mentions Christine's turn is up next. And he also knows that it's going to be an even tougher task for him because Christine isn't Janelle. Christine doesn't resort to her former default mode of being neutral. Christine doesn't temper her standards to make him feel at ease. It's her who was publicly dismissed, her whose emotions were humiliated, her who was told point blank that he wouldn't love her. And it's her who chose to walk away. and that is where the tension begins to build. Because this isn't just an apology tour, this is a structured sequence, ordered path of least resistance first, and then the final reckoning thereafter. Meanwhile, the series suddenly shifts gears. We find ourselves abruptly at Mary's home, and it feels like we are watching an entirely different show. The mood is lighter, almost uncomfortably so. Mary is throwing a fundraiser dinner for a friend, Jen, whose husband has cancer, and sincerely one thing this isn't is not kind, it's genuine. It's one of the only points in this episode where everything isn't transactionally based. However, there is a complication. Ron, yes, that Ron, speed dating Ron, the one audiences likely forgot even existed. Well, here he is at the fundraiser. Now, the producer markings are all over this one because it seems Mary's not thinking about her grief, her loss, her abandonment. She's thinking about dating, or maybe she is. It's a process of getting to know each other. Mary tries to explain about her relationship with the mysterious man. She refuses to use the D word or any other label for the relationship she shares with the man she admits is fascinating to her. And when Mary does talk about seeing the man or spending time with him, she refuses to use the D word or anything closely resembling it. Ron gets to the bicycle shop where the fundraiser has been organized and says hello to Mary with a side hug. And if you know, the side hug, the most notorious, least emotionally involved of hugs in fundamentalist society, it is a clean, sanitary, and non-threatening gesture. It is a symbol, almost, of the whole event surrounded by a certain high degree, not into small talk. He says they have conversations, rest, and the weather, nothing of consequence, nothing dangerous. He talks about not wanting a helmet when he bikes. Just put your hands out, Instead of a helmet, none of them wear any. Later, he assists with the eggs at the fundraiser, cracks them badly. Shells come in, the eggs are scrambled instead of fried. This annoys Mary, not explosively so, tight, controlled, observing. And it all just feels awkward. As a think piece. It's interesting because it gets into the actual experience of the contestants. It talks a lot about the lack of a romantic relationship in the experience. It gives examples of the kind of things the contestants are asked to do. In the article, it says, because imagine being, and then we cut to Vegas. Christine and David are getting the final pieces of their preparation work done in their hotel room before what will prove to be the heart of this episode. The confrontation, the talk that has been hyped and anticipated. David says it could go either way, good or bad, he concluded, which sounds obvious, but sort of tells. Because this isn't exactly casual, this isn't exactly friendly. This has consequences. David here has a purpose in all this, which is to protect Christine, he explains, in order to ensure that she's not hurt again. And that statement alone should give you an idea of how much pain these wounds are still causing. He says, because if all these matters were put to rest, that level of protection wouldn't be needed. I'm only meeting Christine, you're meeting David as well. And Kody also confesses he's seen David make statements about him, impressions drawn without actually meeting someone in person. Thus, this meeting, insofar as Kody is concerned, is also about correcting impressions and narratives. They walk into a vast private hotel room with a humongous table, and right off, Christine feels a sense of discomfort. She finds herself asking if anyone else will come. The room simply feels too large. It feels too formal. It feels like a set. Kody takes a seat with them right away and tells them to drink those beers quickly since he has something he wants to say. The irony there is thick. Drinking was considered a no-no in their belief systems. And now, it is the grease for the wheels of emotional damage control. Without warming up to it, Kody just blurts out his apology because of how the split occurred, because of the anger. Because of the not-so-good times, his apology is to also recognize the good times. It's very broad, the language I apologize for everything without specifying anything in particular, and you have to wonder who taught him to handle the situation in this manner. because it has all the look and feel of a reset button that he hopes will simply be accepted. David attempts to close the divide. Sometimes I can understand Kody, man to man, he says, but Kody isn't listening to him. His interest remains fixed on Christine. Then Kody apologizes for saying he didn't love Megan, and Christine is obviously uncomfortable. Because just think about the image sitting there with your newfound husband while your ex is telling you he used to love you. That is awkward, unnecessary, and Christine wants that closed. Buried, not even considered, and that is where this episode ends, and us emotionally unsettled. But none of this is particularly genuine. Kody admits that he's even questioned whether Christine will take him seriously, and this sets up a question that no one wants to ask. But which must now be asked. Does he do this because he means it, or because the show needs this, and hanging over it all is a problem that will neither go away nor be stayed? The kids! In the upcoming episode promo, David states something fans have been begging for years. Kody needs to teach the children first. Fix that first problem. Then fix the wives. Thus, why hasn't he? Where's the apology tour for grown-ups, but not a peep about the kids who have been out in the open, hurt, disregarded, and emotionally abandoned? But that question, that contradiction, is where the real beginnings of the story unfold. Because if things aren't right with the kids, how is any of this supposed to be right at all? Take a step back and look at everything that's going on, and if you look at the pattern that emerges, you can't unsee it because this story is not about reconciliation. It's a play for control over time, control over telling, and control over who has access to Kody Brown's remorse. And who doesn't? Now let's go back to Janelle because, although her story in this episode is less explosive, it is much more telling. Janelle sits down with her girlfriends to process Kody's trip to North Carolina. And from the start, it feels like a different world altogether. These women are not starstruck. They are not on edge. They are not tiptoeing around eggshells. They even joke about whether Kody showed up with a man, bun, and a visor, which is cute. Yes, but it's also telling. It means he's not being taken seriously as a source of authority. He's no longer intimidating. He's no longer untouchable. He's ridiculous, and that is a huge shift from where this family was. Janelle is confirming something that gives a whole different meaning to the whole first scene involving Robyn. That she specifically asked Kody not to bring Robyn with him, not as a punishment, not as a power play, but as a boundary. And Janelle is very clear about this anything to do with Robyn. She's not going there. That one weighs heavily because for years, Janelle has tried. She has tried to coexist. She has tried to compromise. She has tried to swallow her discomfort for the sake of the unity of the family. And now? Well, she is tired of doing the work of emotional labor with regard to the presence often then. Suddenly, Robyn's earlier micro-expressions make total sense. It wasn't just that Robyn was shocked at the apology. She had also been left out of the apology. And exclusion, especially when you're accustomed to being the emotional gatekeeper, threatens. What's admirable about Janelle in this scenario is her composure. There's no anger, no rant, only clarity. Janelle doesn't have to prove anything to anyone. She understands exactly what she's had it with, and this is something Kody appears to be completely unequipped to handle because Kody's entire apology really does hinge on the fact that the women still want access to him, that they still want his validation, that they still need closure on his terms. Instead, Janelle no longer pursues that. As for Christine has gone even further beyond that. But again, all this brings us back to that Vegas meeting because the emotional stakes are much higher there than Kody has yet comprehended. Kody enters this room thinking he will be greeted with appreciation, or at least some semblance of relief. He believes his apology will be accepted as a sign of growth, as a maturation, as an effort. But Christine isn't sitting there in her role as former wife. She is sitting there as a survivor of him. But having David, there is a whole different story. David is not passive. David is not intimidated. David is not nostalgic. David is concerned with one thing alone, the emotional integrity of Christine. That's why his statement about protecting her is so important. It's all about emphasizing that Christine never had someone, let alone a husband, who cared about her well-being over his ego in a marriage. And you see the struggle Kody is having with that dynamic. He doesn't really interact with David. He doesn't push a conversation. He doesn't ask questions. He keeps it at a surface level, like to recognize. David is to recognize that Christine actually did indeed move on, not just in her emotional state, but in her organization. When Kody speaks about apologizing for claiming he doesn't love Christine, he does so almost as if he's issuing a correction, as if he's trying to set the record straight. And it is here that the undertone of gaslighting makes its presence felt because for years she was told she was imagining things, overreacting, misinterpreting his words and actions. Now, he is apologizing for these things, but not taking the blame for them completely. It's not anger that Christine reacts to. She reacts which wants the past to stay in the past, where it belongs. She doesn't need any kind of validation anymore. She doesn't need any clarification regarding his emotions. She had already moved on with her life without that clarification, and that is also devastating to Kody, in a quiet kind of way, because it means that his apology does not carry the weight he believes it does. At the same time, the storyline of Meri still seems to have a disconnected relationship to the emotional reality of the rest of the family. Yes, the fundraiser is altruistic. Yes, Ron is there. But in every way, this encounter is tentative, awkward, and inconclusive. Meri isn't shining. She isn't hopeful. She's cautious, observing, controlling, and when Ron screws up the eggs, when things don't go as planned, her annoyance leaks out. Not dramatically, but simmeringly. It's not about the eggs, it is a question of control for years. Meri had no control over her marriage, her role, or her status in her family. And look how tightly, even in something as small as a fundraiser, you see her clinging to what power she has left. But what about Ron? He's like a filler character, a plot device, a guy to fill up space as opposed to filling a gap. This inevitably brings up another rather uncomfortable question. Is Meri being offered an opportunity to move forward, or merely being utilized as an opportunity to create the appearance thereof? But then there is the elephant in the room, which the episode keeps referring to but never chooses to confront. The kids. And the reason for that is that while Kody is apologizing to the wives, fixing the optics, and reinventing himself as the thinking and responsive one, he has problems with his children, and no amount of reconciliation in adulthood can fill this gap. It's straightforwardly stated by David in the teaser. Kody should have begun with the kids. And viewers know that he's right. So why hasn't he? Is it pride? Fear? Control? Or the simple recognition that to apologize to the kids, a list accountability would have to follow, and an admission that can't be finessed with a vague explanation? Because kids remember details. They remember forgotten birthdays, missed phone calls, public rejection, emotional absence, nor do they feel compelled to accept an apology in order to maintain harmony the way adults would. Thus, as this episode comes to a conclusion, the tension is not resolved. It's sharpened because Kody's apology tour may be moving forward, but the foundation beneath it is still cracked. And then we also need to consider the intersection between performance accountability and lived emotional impact, and why fans are no longer buying the narrative that is being offered here through redemption. In this stage of the episode, something subtle but significant has happened, not on the level of the narrative itself, but with regard to how the audience is supposed to read what they are watching, because at this point, it's obvious that it's not just broken marriages that are being dealt with here. This is a man struggling to assert his dominance in a family that no longer considers him the core of it all, and you can just feel that desperation in the way that Kody moves through all that. Apology tour. Again, so let's go back to apology tour, a term that keeps ringing through, and think about what it actually entails to apologize. An apology is supposed to be all about the person that's been wronged, right? An apology has to concern a wronged individual, a wrong people, a wrong person, or a wrong group. An apology has, but Kody's apologies aren't doing the heavy lifting. They are structured. They are organized. First, Janelle, obviously the least emotionally explosive, the most pragmatic, and the easiest to start with. Then Christine, the most visible rift, the one most necessary to resolve with. And conspicuously absent in this roll call, the children, and Mary. Beyond mere surface courtesy, that's not coincidental. This is Kody trying to keep the story together before it falls apart. All because of what he understands, but the show doesn't. Public opinion has shifted. Viewers aren't confused anymore. They're angry. They've seen favoritism, misdirection, and emotional abuse reach a boiling point, and Kody feels the pressure. You can hear it in his statements about not knowing if he'll be taken seriously by Christine. That's not humility. That's anxiety. To be taken seriously is to be believed, and to be believed is to be held accountable, Crystal Eichman writes. But this is the one thing that Kody has managed to avoid. Christine, on the other hand, is no longer trying to negotiate for emotional crumbs. Her behavior in the meeting is calm, earthed, almost aloof. It is her detachment that unsettles Kody the most, because anger, yes, I understand. Tears, I could turn away. But indifference? Indifference means he no longer has leverage. David's presence magnifies this fact. While David is not confrontational towards Kody, he does not raise his voice. He does not stage masculinity. He is merely there, the constant shield, and unimpressed by Kody's explanations, and that, in and of itself, is enough to unsettle Kody. Sometimes, David says, I can understand where Kody is coming from. This is an olive branch. Yet Kody does not extend an olive branch in return. Kody does not lean in. Kody does not respond in kind. This would mean Kody must respect David as an equal. This would mean Christine picked better, but that is a truth of which Kody is as yet unaware. What replaces it is a retreat into vague apologies and general regrets. His apologies are for how things happened, for the anger, for bad moments, but not specifics. No naming of patterns, no pointing to the lasting damage to emotions, and that avoidance is key. First of all, he would have to be specific, and that would mean addressing the one pattern that the fans have been warning about all these years: favoritism. Favoritism involving Robyn, involving her kids, involving her family, involving the life he built while letting everything else around him collapse, and the series continues to remind us of this reality with graphical illustrations. Think about that first scene again. With Kody learning, Robyn watching, flirting, and so affirming that he is a good dad. That intimacy, that ease, that partnership. But then compare this with the stiffness and formalness he displays. In dealing with Christine and Janelle, these are not the same relationships, and the audience recognizes it. This is why Janelle's boundary between herself and Robyn is so significant. It is far from petty. It is a precautionary measure. They all know that Robyn's influence shakes things up, and this isn't due to the fact that Robyn is a wicked woman, but because Kody acts in a different manner when in her company. Robyn becomes filter, validator, emotional compass that Kody follows, and without her there, Kody is vulnerable. This is why Robyn's behavior earlier is so significant. Robyn wasn't merely shocked. She was disturbed by the fact that Kody handled an emotionally charged situation without her supervision, for she has, for years, been portrayed quietly and subtly as the interpreter of the emotions of everybody else. In addition, that role is also being challenged. In the meantime, the storyline of Mary seems to run on a different timeline altogether. The fundraiser is finished. Ron becomes a background figure. And again, Mary is left in a position which appears to be moving forward, but feels empty. It had nothing to do with perfection. It had to do with being noticed, with having some aspect of her world working properly when so much is going wrong. And yet, in the fact that this is the story that this woman has to be offered, that this could be her romance. This could be her interaction is almost cruel in light of how emotionally sidelined she was for so long. She is being portrayed complexity deficitly. She is being portrayed distractionally, which leads directly back to the larger problem at hand in this episode, avoidance. The show does not interact with the kids. Kody does not provide specific information. TLC does not provide accountability. And in the wake of this lack of progress storm, we are left with the implications of forward momentum. But the audience isn't fooled anymore. It wasn't about passing off someone's hard work or creativity as your own or something you came up with on your own. These rat holes of denial have been a concern for fans in the past 24. His apology in relation to his claims of not being in love with Christine does not come across as growth. It comes across as damage control, since love isn't something that can be withdrawn and re-released like a press release. And Christine knows that. That's why she's been trying to keep the past preserved. Not because it's irrelevant, but because it's irrelevant to who she is, and that's the moment where the power shift is reversed in fact. However, Kody thought that he was leading the healing process. However, it is evident at the end of this section of the story that he is reacting, not leading, responding to barriers that he cannot breach, for women whom he no longer needs, for an audience that sees past his performance, and then, of course, there is the matter of the point at which it all clicks into focus, where the attempted reconciliation that Kody seeks intersects directly with the reality he has been ignoring. Because there is a point of breaking ahead, and when it hits, it changes everything. By the time this episode comes to a close, an uncomfortable reality settles in, and it's not just with the family, but also with the viewing audience. Because now the question is not what if we work this out. The ultimate question here is, who is this for anyway? Kody's apology tour, when you take the words and the performance out of the equation, isn't about fixing what's been broken. It's a return to a piece of himself that doesn't exist. The patriarch, the leader, the man whose presence in the room was supposed to be enough to keep all the plates spinning. And that Kody is gone. The awkwardness of this episode comes from the fact that the people he's apologizing to have already worked through their emotions without him. I Will Bring Him Hope introduces the story of Antoine Maternelle as a realist. She is no longer mad, though, and that is actually even more damaging to Kody than her anger was. Where anger was a sign of engagement, a sign of investment in the relationships, Janelle's acceptance is a sign of disengagement. Her boundaries with Robyn are not about punishing Robyn, they're about peace. Once you're at a place of peace, you can't be drawn back by words. Christine has already finished the race. Kody is still jogging towards the finish line. She has put her life back together. She is whole. She has found love that won't make her beg, explain, or diminish who she is. Across from Kody, she is not seeking validation. Rather, she is delivering closure. Closure doesn't ask permission. Even Mary is this thin thread that reveals the truth the show cannot articulate aloud. Moving on isn't linear or guaranteed even when the cameras are rolling. It's her uncomfortable moments that are filled with precision and lack of enthusiasm that convey the years of emotional starvation that don't suddenly dissipate because a novel character is set before her. And then there are the kids. The silence surrounding them is deafening. Because while adults can negotiate, rationalize, and compartmentalize, children remember how it felt. They remember who was there, who wasn't, who chose to stay back, who chose pride, and no apology tour that skips them can ever be complete. That's why David's words are what hurt the most about this episode. Kody Brown needs to have started with his children, not as a narrative arc, not as a broadcast event, but as dad. And that he did not. We know exactly where his priorities lie. This installment does not settle anything. Rather, it highlights the gap existing between performative accountability and actual accountability. Between saying the right words and doing the hardest thing, from wanting forgiveness to earning it. This explains why fans are no longer confused but rather tired of waiting, they've seen the favoritism masquerading as leadership, the control masquerading as concern, the emotional abuse disguised as setting boundaries, and now, with the consequence staring them in the face. We're to believe that a couple of apologies will put them back on track, but life's not like that. Families don't work that way, neither does healing. So, when this episode ends, the hope you're left with isn't hope. It's clarity, awareness regarding who is moving on, who is stuck, and who is still trying to control public perception instead of accepting reality. But if this story teaches us anything, it's this: working things out isn't about you realizing you're ready to say sorry. It is about being prepared to hear no, about embracing distance, about being able to coexist with the results of your decision. And Kody Brown isn't there either if you've made it this far. I want to hear from you. Is the apology a sincere move or a calculated strategy? Is it possible to have accountability without repairing the relationships between the kids? Do you also think that without addressing the fact that favoritism has broken the foundations of that family, they will ever be able to move ahead? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you're sticking with me as this plays out, make sure you're subscribed because this tale is far from over. Not even close.